and say good morning or good afternoon or good evening for all of the people who will be accessing this in real time, or in, I guess the opposite of real time is fake time, in the recording mode. I we're doing this in the morning as an experiment, and so far the experiment is only so-so. All the people who would be accessing all the people for whom 10 a.m. my time is convenient for them are not on the call. So we'll see what happens in our future. As you know, we're taking these sessions and dividing them in two. The first part, I'm going to go over something that is, let's just call it standard operating procedure for Commonway, things that I've been covering for a long time. And I just had somebody talk to me about that and say how much they've been appreciating going over the things that they actually know. And they said it's helping them to get confident enough for them to go and talk to other people about the same things. So we're doing that. And then in the second hour, we'll be talking about things that are at the horizon or at the cutting edge of where my thought has been, and you can help me to process that. So in terms of our first hour, I have three topics that we will be talking about, but I'm not sure we're going to get to all three of them, because the first one, and I'm taking them in reverse order, is powerful enough for us to stay there most of the hour. And that's going to be deep identity and deep conflict. How many of you have done any deep identity, deep conflict work with me at any point in time? Yes. And so for you, this is going to be refresher. For the others, oh, by the way, we're up to 50 people who are registered, and in terms of looking at the prior recordings of the prior months, everybody's checking out the recordings. So it's not like people are going to get to it when they can. People are actively involved in doing that and checking out the recordings. So this idea or this notion of deep identity is something I'm going to ask folks to mute themselves, and I am going to share my screen in a minute. Get my screen lined up. So this notion of deep identity and deep conflict is something that came to me some years ago. And the reason that it came to me is that we were talking about the things that were dividing us in our society. We've been talking about what I call status issues. We've also been talking about behavioral issues. Status issues are the things that we're dividing around our status, meaning the things about me that I can't change. Um, when you look at me, you see someone with, brown skin, fairly obviously male, um, you know, brown eyes. These are things that I was about to say can't change, but I think Michael Jackson proved that a lot of them can. But generally, this is the hand that you've been dealt. This is who you are. Then there's some things that are behavioral issues. I've got a bald head. Well, it's the hair is receding, but if I started growing it again, there'd be hair on my head. I've got a beard. I can shave that off. Actually, I can shave that off and put it on top of my head. And those are more behavioral things. How you vote, what your occupation is. These are behavioral things. Now, I would suggest to us that neither the status things or the behavioral things are showstoppers. We don't need to bog down around those things. In fact, we need to look at why we're bogging down on these things. Generally, it's to sell newspapers, and I think when I say that, I mean, like, when's the last time you actually paid for a newspaper? It's to sell advertising eyeballs. Okay, and what we can do is start to lessen the impact of that. But there are things that tend to separate us. And so as I started considering what those things are, I started looking at the question of deep identity and deep conflict. I started seeing that there were conflicts that seemed to transcend generations. Okay, that the conflicts seem to be there for a long time. Dozens of years, hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. So what is the nature of these conflicts, and what is the nature of this question of deep identity and deep conflict? So this is the point where I get to share my screen with you. And the question of deep identity and deep conflict, as I just said, all of us have identities. Some of our identity is status, and some of our identity is behavior. A lot of our identity that we picked up at a very, very early age. We picked up our identity before we picked up the ability to think about our identity. Now, child psychologists say that our concrete and abstract thinking as a child comes in somewhere around 7 or 8 or 9 years old. But by 7 or 8 or 9 years old, large parts of your identity are already in place. And the parts of your identity that are in place are the parts of your identity that you generally have the most difficulty talking about. The most difficulty being challenged about. The most difficulty being where you're being asked to comment on it. And so this question of deep identity are the parts of your identity that you acquired before you acquired the capacity for rational thought. Your voting registration is not a part of your deep identity, no matter how much you fight about it, because when you were 7 years old, you were not registered to vote, unless you were in some country I've never heard of. But the parts of your identity that you were aware of are these. And I put them in 5 categories. And so I've been talking about deep identity for 7, 8, 9 years or so. Maybe more than that. I have to go back and look at my origins there. But just last month, I got my first question on that. Somebody asked me, why these 5? It's like, I thought it was obvious. And so obviously it wasn't obvious. And these are the ones that seem to be the most intractable to me. These are the ones that have been the basis of either a war or some kind of physical conflict with people, or the basis of a deep conflict that doesn't seem to be able to go away. And so, and there are these are generally combined in conflicts. Let's go through them, and then we'll look at how they get combined. So the first one is race, ethnicity, and culture. And as I always say, right from the beginning, you know I'm cheating, because you know that race is different from ethnicity, and ethnicity is different from culture. But when you are 3 years old, you don't know that. All you know is some people get treated differently from other people, and some have dark skin, some have light skin, some have accents, some don't have accents, etc. The ways that we conflict with each other get to be really, really interesting around this, especially when you have a deep identity around race that conflicts with somebody else's deep identity around race, where you can get 2 or more groups who see themselves as minorities, who see themselves as being oppressed, fighting each other. That gets amazingly weird. This is a situation that I was facing when I was working in Sri Lanka, where both the Sinhalese and the Tamils thought of themselves as a minority, as an oppressed minority group. And that was one of the things that was feeding the war. They couldn't figure out, they both felt that they were fighting for their identity. The Sinhalese were the majority on that island. But Sinhala is not spoken anywhere else on earth. So they see themselves as a deep minority in terms of from a global perspective. The Tamils, or they're only like a third of the population in Sri Lanka, but India is right close by, and there's tens of millions of Tamil Indians in India. So while they're the minority on the island, they're the majority in the region. And so this just got amazingly messy. And that's why it leads the list on the primary aspects of deep identity. The second was language. you did not select the language. You didn't choose to speak the language that is your normal, um, uh, your chosen. Well, I shouldn't say the language that was chosen for you by your parents. You did what every other being on the planet does. You started mimicking the language that was spoken around you. And you were reinforced when you got it right, and you were ignored when you got it wrong. And there's this tendency to want to get it right. If there were two languages spoken around you, you learned how to speak both of them. You didn't understand that there were two languages being spoken around you. You just kind of went ba 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 ba, and you kept going. Um, the this is one of the primary places where people will say that if they hear another language spoken, they get twitchy. They get, like, why are, like, they're talking about me. How many of you have had that as an experience? You can either raise your meat hand or you can raise your digital hand. And you can have I generally have made myself immune to that. However, I don't, it does come up from time to time. And it can come up in funny ways, and it also can come up in ways that are not so funny, and we may get into that a little later. Third one is class. And again, from the 50s or so, in America, you could hide your class because of the prevalence of credit. So you could buy more car than you could actually afford. You could buy more house that you can actually afford. You can look like you are of another class. Most people in the world can't do that, and the side of town that you were raised in, the kinds of schools that you went to, the kind of work that you did, all of that was based on your class. When you start thinking about how race, ethnicity, and culture and class combine with each other, when they decided to integrate the schools, the thing they had to do was bus children of one class to the schools of children of a different class. It's like, why were these schools so different in the first place? And no one wanted to talk about it. They're like, oh, gee, I don't know. It's kind of like however schools get plopped down. I don't know. It's like, we know we gave the good schools to the middle and upper class communities, and we gave the poorer schools to the poorer communities, if they got any at all. And that's the way it was. Okay. Fourth is religion. And again, since the 50s or so, people could pretty much live in any community they want to live in, that they have the money for. But before that time, and still around the world in other societies, where you lived, what you did, the side of town you lived on was dependent on your religion. when I was in law school, this is when they were doing the racial desegregation of the schools. And it was holy hell trying to get South Boston integrated. Part of the problem was you're bringing Black children into a very, very white community. Part of the problem was we're bringing non-Catholic children into a very, very Catholic community. I'm not sure which upset them the most. One of the things, I was the chairman of the Black Law Students Association when I was at Boston University. And one of the things that we did was put law students as monitors on the buses that were busing the children into the schools in South Boston. And after about 2 or 3 months, I pulled all the monitors out because every day was an incident. Every day you were transiting this hailstorm of rocks and bottles and everything else being thrown at these buses. The windows were broken out almost every day. Students are coming back to the law school combing glass out of their hair. And at one point in time, they were interviewing one of the leaders of the anti-desegregation effort, anti-desegregation, the leader of the segregation effort, Madeline Murray O'Hare. And the newscaster mentioned to her that the scores for the Black students, the standardized tests for the Black students under desegregation, the scores went up. But the scores for the white students went up also. The white students were getting smarter in desegregation. And she said on the air, we don't care. She said, we don't care if our children are as dumb as posts. What we care about is that they don't go to school with Blacks. Now, and that statement got her elected to Boston City Council. So this combination in this situation of race, ethnicity, and religion played itself out in some interesting ways. And then the last one on my list is gender. From the time you were brought home from the hospital, wrapped in a blue blanket if you were a boy, wrapped in a pink blanket if you were a girl, people treated you differently. A lot of that difference, we can't even begin to sort it out. I get caught by this a lot on my own. Hey, I wrote all this stuff, so I shouldn't be the one getting caught in it, but I get caught in it. I get caught in here in Portland. I don't know if this is true in other towns the way it's true here in Portland, but there are people who go out of their way to hide or disguise or have a non-gender-based presentation of self. And just like I said with language, if you don't understand the language, you can feel anxious, you can feel threatened, you can feel that you have to defend yourself, etc. There's situations where I simply cannot, I'm talking to someone and I cannot determine what gender they are presenting, if any. And I'll realize that I'm not flowing in my conversation the way I am with you. I'm talking really slowly, and I'm watching all the words coming out of my mouth. It's not a conversation that I look to extend. And well, the one thing about this in terms of deep identity is I know why I'm doing that. And this is the biggest takeaway that I want to remind you of in looking at deep identity. A lot of this stuff you can't fix. This is the core of who you are. What you do is be aware of it, and when it comes up for you, just take a step back and recognize this is not necessarily reality. This is my take on reality. Okay. Let me go to my next slide. So, deep identity, if you have conflict based on deep identity, that's called deep conflict. Most of the wars that are happening on the planet right now are based on deep conflict. So the deep conflict goes to the core of our being, core of our beliefs and our behaviors. If you want to see an example of that, look in Iran right now with the very, very powerful demonstrations that are going on based on the head covering in that area, which has little to nothing to do with Islam. I've read the Quran backwards and forwards. I've read most of the major hadith, and that's another story what the Quran and hadith is. And it doesn't say a woman is required to cover her hair. It doesn't say how they're supposed to do that. That's the interpretation of a society that goes back a few thousand years. That can be stronger than the religion itself. This is me being disciplined and not going any further down that rabbit hole. Because the conflict in and of itself is beyond rational thought. You can't end the conflict by appealing to rational thought. So the people who talk about, oh, we're just going to talk to these people and we're going to have a conversation. At the end of the conversation, everybody will agree and shake hands, and that doesn't work when you're addressing something about why a person feels so uneasy around a situation that I wouldn't feel uneasy about because it's not part of my race, ethnicity, and culture, language, class, religion, or gender. Whoops. I need to go backwards. Okay. So when you're looking at deep conflict, you're looking at conflict between two or more different aspects of reality. Someone is questioning my reality. And you don't want to do that. There's a lot of things you want to do in the world, but questioning someone's reality is not one of them. And that's why these things go on and on and on. Okay, I am going to pause the slides here. And I'm going to ask if there are any questions or comments or thoughts around deep identity. I'm talking slowly to give people an opportunity to turn on their device, turn on their cameras if they want to. I am seeing, let's see, we've got 9 people, and I'm seeing a hand go up, but I'm not seeing a person attached to the hand. If you are calling on a phone, if you can just start talking, and
Sure, my hand's up, Sharif. It's
um,
Greg.
no, Greg, I see you. Okay, and wait, but I don't see.
I'm the only one with a hand up.
No, I've got another hand. If you go to your participants, I see a second hand. I'm okay. We're going once, we're going twice. If there's a person who is trying to talk, I am not hearing you. We are now going to go to Greg. Okay.
Okay, the comment that I wanted to make is a lot of times when you talk about deep identity, you don't mention the most intimate and personal aspects of deep identity, right? It seems to me that a big part of deep identity is toileting, eating, how we eat, what foods we eat, what we call them. Things like hand gestures, smiles. There are all sorts of things that are part of your deep identity that don't necessarily show up in an adult conversation about deep identity, but can be triggers for lots of people. I just wanted to make sure that was in the conversation.
Yeah. I actually have a couple other slides that I use. Number one, you're absolutely correct. These are not, this is the 5 aspects of deep identity is not an exhaustive list. And if we wanted to exhaust the list, you can get, it's amazing the levels of conflict that will come up around things like toileting and toilet training. Seat up or seat down. You want to start a fight in the room? I mean, you want to start a fight that does not resolve itself? This does the toilet paper go over or under? You know, that we're laughing at it, but this can be not funny, you know, and people don't. Again, what I'm saying here is that this is conflicting not with another idea that people have. This is conflicting with your reality. If you have always done things this way, this just came up for me. I've got 2 examples of this. The one that came up really recently, it's one of those things I should have written down because I'm watching these 2 people getting ready to get into it based on what their mommies told them 40 years ago. Okay. Now, I was not in a position to be an arbiter and say, look, you're conflicting about your mother's 40 years ago. Okay. But I can tell you one that came up for me very personally. My last relationship, which was 5 or more years ago, was with a woman who was 2nd generation Italian. Now, we had a great time together. Everything was going really well until the grits issue came up. Now, My mom cooked grits. Her mom cooked polenta. Now, I don't know if you know that when you cook grits, 5 minutes, you're done. Polenta takes 30 minutes. I'm like, how can you cook this for 30 minutes? It takes, okay, so at first we were like, oh, that's really interesting, and then it's like, wait a minute, that ain't the way to do it. And then she went nuclear on me by bringing her grandmother into it. Okay, I watched my grandmother make grits, and it takes 30 minutes to make the grits, and you can only use a wooden spoon, and da 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 da. And I won't tell you the results, but we're not together anymore. No, we're not together over something else. It didn't devolve to that. But it got to the point where she would not eat. It doesn't matter what it tastes like. What mattered was, if you didn't make it the way my mother and my grandmother made it, I don't want to eat it. And so this can get really, really seriously heated over what you think of as trivialities. But it's a triviality that drills down to the depth of your core of your being. Any other questions or comments or thoughts before we move along? Does everybody see this? Does everybody have some deep identity issue that they can think of on their own? If not, I can break us into small groups and we can start digging for them. I'm not seeing hands go up, so I think that must mean it's time for us to get you in small groups. We're not enough of us on the call to actually justify small groups. I'm going to ask each of us this question, and I want you to answer on in real time. The more of you who volunteer, the faster this will go, and I'll just make sure that everybody gets a chance to answer this. And the question is, have you been in a deep identity situation as a minority? So, for example, you're the only English speaker around a bunch of Spanish speakers, or a bunch of people who are speaking some language other than yours. And the second part of the question is, how did you feel and how did you handle it? I'm going to go down my list here. Okay, so Angela's first on my list. Angela, I don't see you. And I'm not hearing you. Even if you don't want to turn your camera on, you need to turn your microphone on. Answering without the microphone on doesn't count. And I'm kind of drawing this out. Angela, I'm going to come back to you. Greg, you're next on my list.
Okay, well, I haven't had too many deep identity situations with a language that I didn't totally understand. I'm not that widely traveled, and I'm fluent in French, which means that I can understand something of Spanish and other languages. So I think about the difference. One of the things that I found really interesting when I was living in France was the different ways, the different sort of hand gestures French people use compared to American gestures. And in general, just because I was studying these things, it didn't make me uncomfortable, but I was very aware of how differently, well, an example linguistically is the feminist movement in America caused women to want to de-gender job titles, right? In other words, firefighter instead of fireman, police officer, flight attendant, etc. In France, women wanted, that's a gendered language where you say things one way if it's male and another way if it's female. They wanted gendered job titles so that a woman could be a professeuse as opposed to a professeur, right? Because it was typically a man's job and there was no feminine equivalent. So it's interesting to see the way the two languages dealt with the same issue because of the difference in the language.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Angela, you are now visible. I don't know if you are both going to be audible now. You're not. You need to turn your microphone on.
Now,
There you
can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're speaking about gender relations and
No, we're talking about deep identity, and your deep identity issue may be any of the five. So it may be language, it may be class, etc.
deep identity. Deep identity for me is really felt deeply within. I mean, I'm quite comfortable. I know a lot of people around me are not comfortable with the gay community. It's, I'm in rural Missouri, so there's a lot I've had conversations with people where that type of situation where people are choosing to change their female status to male or whatever, and it leaves people like shaking, like literally, like they just don't know how to handle that at all. Fortunately, I feel a little bit, I mean, I've noticed, just the awkwardness at first of that, but it's so prevalent everywhere and people are very open about it anymore. And, like that was one thing for sure. Like when I was in high school, back in the 80s, it was not accepted at all. Whereas the kids nowadays, have no problem showing it, or they're on the edge of just being very accepted. I think some people are just a little on the edge about opening up, but mostly it's quite accepted, and it's interesting how far that's come. So that's kind of that's where I go with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're
And now Greg is next on my hit list.
And here I am, the other Greg.
The other Greg. Both of you are the other Greg, yes.
I have the biggest problem with other people using my name. Okay.
And I see you made the distinction by adding an extra G. And if that doesn't work, you put a few more on there too.
At a company I worked at, we had a vice president who was Greg also. He was referred to as Greg, and I was referred to as double G. So we worked out our differences there. I think the deep identity area that I've had the most, not challenge with, but the most exposure to, I guess, be the best to talking about, is the area of religions. Came up through Catholic education, went to public high school, and it was amazing that left turn that I made there. from a very consistent, cohesive type of class format to something that was totally different. And it was interesting to find out other people's religions, because I had made opinions about them. And then I find out their religion, and I find out that that belief didn't necessarily go with where I saw them. And I had Lutheran friends, which my parents never had Lutheran friends. They weren't allowed in the same neighborhood. And so in the military, religion was a huge area. And matter of fact, it was a positive area, because when you're in real stress situations, your God connection, your religion really is important to you. It gets closer and closer the further out you get. And you have people of strong faith, of different faiths, recognizing that in each other and not disputing it, not putting this over that, but seeing that that was a real value. I amazed myself making huge efforts to get to church on Sunday there, because there was a challenge, there was chaos, there was danger, there were all kinds of things in the environment. And at home, you didn't have that. It was, go to Sunday. It was something you just did. And out there, it was something you looked forward to, because you could ground and be with people of other religions that all had that same need to connect at a little higher level. So I'd say that was certainly a very visible area for me as far as deep identity.
I'm not supposed to call on myself, but I want to follow up on that for a bit.
Sharif, go ahead.
No, thank you. As I think all of you know, I am a practitioner of everything at this point in time. But there was a time in my life when I was solo and exclusive in terms of Islam, and I would go. We lived in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, and there were several mosques that were identified. And my wife and I would go to that mosque, and everybody would be twitchy, because the mosque was not just a mosque, it was a Pakistani mosque. Okay. And it's like, well, we're all praying together, and it's like, no, we're, so some people were would like trying to like extend like welcome, etc. But they want to get together and speak Urdu. That's what for a lot of them, there was no religious context at all. It was a cultural context. I get to wear certain clothes, and I get to speak Urdu, and I get to talk about the homeland, and who are these people over here? So there's that. So I was called, even though I was the minority, I was calling their religious expression into question just by walking in the room. Okay. Which I thought was really interesting. Okay. Let's see. Josette.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. What came to mind for me, and I'm not really sure I quite understand the question, but I'll give it a try. I spent 3 years in Guatemala and Antigua. And while there, I did learn some Spanish. But the particular situation that left me twitchy, and I don't know about the other people, was in the grocery store. And, in kindergarten, we learned to get in line. And you don't cut. And so I was in the store at the meat counter, and there was no line, and everyone was there and the clerk would just kind of pick someone. And I found my place in what I considered the order of the line, but then other people would come from behind me and I would scoot up and they would scoot up and I'd scoot up some more trying to get identified. But my Spanish wasn't strong enough. I wanted to address the issue, but my Spanish wasn't strong enough. And then I got to thinking, I finally just stepped back and waited so that I could process and get control of my emotions. And then I decided that I'm in this different culture that has different ways of doing things. And I'm the minority, and I better just stay quiet. And finally, I did get served.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it one bit, how long I had to wait. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, you said you didn't like it. Did you feel anxious? Did you feel?
No, I was pissed off.
Okay, that's a few levels of anxiety there.
And then I felt like I was disempowered.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yep,
And that's
you
what made me
definitely were.
step back and just be quiet and just wait.
This is interesting. I had that experience in Europe. Like, if you're in England, you had to be in line, and it had to be like a really straight line. There are times that I would like kind of wander a little to the left or to the right. So I'm like, no, you got to be directly behind the person in front of you. And then you go to Germany, and it's like, heaven help you, just whose elbows are sharper, okay. We're doing okay, but we're on time here. Marion, I picked you because your mouth was full.
Exactly. There's lots of examples of ethnicity and toilet paper, and Josette's example made me think of, this is slightly different, but I was in IKEA in Palo Alto about a week ago, and it's like 9 p.m. and a bunch of people in line. Like, IKEA needs its own zip code. It's huge, right? And lots of different ethnicities, etc. And we're all standing in line, to the cash registers. And all of a sudden lights start flashing in the whole building, and it's really, really, really loud, like fire alarm type thing or something. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. I'm putting my fingers in my ears, it's like painful, and I'm looking around, like attempting to make eye contact. And then I start verbally saying, does anybody know what's happening? And no one responded. And I think the gentleman behind me didn't speak English. And there was a little bit of eye contact and I had a mask on. So there's a little bit of eye contact with a gentleman, like an aisle over, and I shrugged my shoulders, and then finally, it seemed like it went on for like 10 minutes. And then finally there was an announcement over the loudspeaker, we're having difficulties with our technical, and everybody just evacuate right now, like just go to the nearest exit. And so I just left my cart and I'll skip the details, but it was a little traumatizing, if you will, of the like, oh my God, is there a shooter in the building? Like, what the bleep's going on? And I made it out and all of that and got resilient. My trauma soothing solution was to order pizza.
Listen, pizza solves everything. Generally, just if you throw a slice of pizza on top of it, whatever the problem is,
it helped. It helped.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, that was so fascinating. And I hope if there is some sort of Armageddon experience, like that, we would be kinder and more villagey with each other or something.
Nope.
Yeah.
I was everything everybody is saying is triggering something for me. When I was in law school at Boston University Law School, we were housed in this tall, skinny building, 18 stories, and we had the bottom 9 floors, and then the education department had the upper 9 floors. So I was on the 9th floor, which is the top of the law school classes. And the dean came in while my professor was teaching and said, we don't know how serious this is, but we've had a call that there was a bomb in the building, and we're just going to ask folks to orderly grab your things and orderly file out, and you have to use the stairs. You can't use the elevators, etc. And we, we're kind of getting our stuff together, etc. And somebody says, "Where's the professor?" Now, this woman was Israeli in the 70s. And as soon as the dean said the word bomb, she was already 3 floors down and running at top speed. Okay. She knew what it meant. We were like, this is theoretical bomb. That just means probably that we're going to go and drink more coffee or something, And yeah, she knew what it meant, and she was not waiting around for anything. She left everything right there. She got out of the building.
Yeah, can I say something about what happened at Palo Alto IKEA?
No.
Well, just 2 seconds, because based on what you just said, I was shocked at how unfazed everybody was. People
Right.
kept twiddling with their phone as if nothing had happened.
Yeah.
Like they were ignoring it.
Yeah,
It's a
we
story I made up.
hear about active shooters and we hear about mall shootings, etc., and it doesn't register because we don't have any relationship to it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Robin, your turn.
Okay, I'll go fast. So when I'm in South Africa and I'm the only one who's not speaking Afrikaans, my very first memory of that really striking me as what we're talking about here was a woman who became my friend said, when you first came to our little town in South Africa, I thought you were such a snob. And it dawned on us that everybody was speaking Afrikaans and I didn't understand anything that they were saying. So I was just feeling awkward and separate and self-conscious and trying to figure out how to deal with it all. And she was judging that I was being standoffish and snobby.
Yeah, yeah, and we will put our own spin on it, and that spin is generally not good. That not only are you being judged, but generally you're being judged in a negative way. We're a little over time, but I want to get to Samantha.
I'll try and make it quick. What comes to me most prominently is around class. Growing up, I lived in a pretty upscale white neighborhood, and there was always something that felt relatively off about that to me. It was a very unconscious thing, but there was something that felt shameful in it. And when I ended up going to college in New Brunswick, and you may be familiar with how Rutgers is in the New Brunswick area, there's one specific event I remember where I was actually taunted and harassed because of a diamond necklace I was wearing. And so that illuminated the shame that I had been feeling for a really long time. And so I still sort of harbor a lot of those feelings around shame when it comes to specific money issues and any sort of identity around class. So, yeah.
Well, it happens, and in all. I mean, you were ashamed because you were wearing a diamond necklace. Shamed because you're wearing a diamond necklace. And I was shamed because, gee, I wasn't. And it's interesting how that goes. Catherine, I'm not ignoring you, but you were not in the first part, so you don't know what the question was that we were really answering, and we'll catch you on the second hour, which is going to start in about 3 minutes at my 7 minutes past the hour, for all of us to take a tea and potty break. So I will be back in 3 minutes. Okay, I am back. Looks like I'm the only one back. I actually found the other slides that Greg, the other Greg, was talking about in terms of other types of deep identities. As people are coming back, I will just go through this really quickly. Y'all will get the benefit of being back early. And that includes things like toilet training, and it's amazing how you cannot talk about that. Swallowing, who taught you how to swallow? Who taught you how to eat? You eat with, you chew with your mouth open, you chew with your mouth closed. In China, people will slurp their food very loudly to show that they enjoy it. So if they're doing noodles, they're going, and I'm like, clothing, including your relationship to nudity, and I have a very funny story around that I'm not going to tell you. What you call family. In my world, if I'm in a relationship with a person, I'm in a relationship with that person. In other worlds, if you're in a relationship with that person, you're in a relationship with their entire family, and their entire family will be commenting on your relationship. Relationship to what's outside. Here in the Pacific Northwest, folks, kids are raised outdoors. I wasn't. That's dangerous out there. Relationships to food. Let me see how many folks are here again. What you call food, what consists of food, how you eat with the food, eating with your fingers. I don't know if y'all have been to India and had the opportunity to eat with your fingers. Yeah, so all of that is very interesting. I'm glad I had a chance to do that. It's on the tape now. So let's go to our second part, where we're talking about some cutting edge things. And I've got two things that I'd like to talk about, but I'm not sure I'm going to have time to do both. So both of these things are on the I sent out the newsletter very late last night. Apologize for that. Part of the newsletter was I did a lecture at Evergreen State College recently, and it's got some things in there that I had not talked about before, and so I would ask you to take a look at it. We're going to talk about one or maybe even two of those things right now. One of them is what I call my dishwashing revelation. I've had revelations like at the 15,000 foot level in the Himalayas, and then old cave that was a Buddhist temple. And then I have revelations while I'm washing dishes and watching YouTube videos. So this is the latter. And so I have to wash a lot of dishes because I let them pile up. Okay, so the issue is how long I had to kind of make these associations, etc. And I learned a lot while I'm washing the dishes because I'm putting on various topics. And the topic this time was biology. And there was a YouTube video on the biology of ants. And so I'm sitting there and I'm washing dishes and I'm watching ants. And I learned two things that I didn't know before. And one of them has some repercussions to it. So the first thing was ants have been around for a long, long time. They predate dinosaurs. They're like ancient beings on the planet. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, wow. They're about as old as dragonflies. Dragonflies are really, really old. The second thing I knew was the thing that led this conversation we're about to have, and that is that ants were not always colony beings. Ants, when they were first on the planet, were solo insects and they live a solitary existence, and then later hooked up to become colony beings. And when they did that, became what this video said is arguably the most successful beings on the planet. They're everywhere. They're in every environment. They have thrived on the planet. There's so many trillions of ants on the planet right now. And when they're talking about how successful ants were, I got this idea, and I dried my hands, I got a piece of paper, and I wrote down, I've got it stuck on my, I'm thinking about this constantly now, so I have it stuck on my monitor. I wrote down colony humans. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I was talking about, what I have been talking about in books like this, is that we can and we should become colony beings if we operated as a colony. Every ism, every problem that we've got goes away. All of the problems around poverty, around destroying the environment. Ants don't do that, and we wouldn't do that if we were operating for the benefit of the whole, as opposed to the benefit of me as an individual because I want more money. There are these corporations that go into various areas in the world, including here in the United States, and they use a certain cocktail of chemicals to basically destroy an entire mountain. They can melt the mountain with these chemicals in order to get what is the equivalent of a pickup truck load of gold. Now, everything, every being in that environment suffers. You know, the beings that were living on the mountain, the beings that were living near the mountain, the people, it was just, it's a polluted wasteland that they leave. But this one outfit leaves with a pickup truckload of gold, and therefore you can do that. Because for the individual, money is the most important aspect. It trumps every other possible aspect. That's when we're thinking like breakers. When we're thinking, if we are thinking as a colony being, I am thinking what's good for me as an individual. I'm not going to suffer as an individual, but that individuality is secondary to what's good for the entire colony. What do you have to do to protect the entire colony? If we're thinking about when an ant colony is threatened, two things happen. Number one, the ants will surround and protect the queen at their own, at the end life of the individual. The second thing that happens is that the ants will surround and protect the eggs. So you can say that an ant colony, their first priority are their elders. The second priority is their youngsters. I actually saw this happen while I was working in Sri Lanka, where they had some amazing ant colonies sitting right there near the equator. When there's flooding, you know, the water goes underground and floods the ants out, and the ants will form a ball. The entire community starts forming a ball around the queen and around the eggs. And they link all their arms, and they have a lot of them. So together to form this ball, and they will, the ball will actually float on the water, and they'll get carried to some other area. And when it dries out enough, they'll dig down and they'll stick the queen and the eggs in there. But the ants that are on the bottom of the ball drown, they die, okay? And they keep their arms and legs linked. So they act as a mat that is keeping the queen and the eggs dry. Even in their death, they're still actively pursuing their goal. And the goal is the preservation of the colony. Now, how many of us do exactly the opposite? You know, you leave your kids, you leave you leave the old folks, and you go running for the hills by yourself. Okay, that your primary goal is the preservation of your own body. Secondary goal is the preservation of your own money. Okay, and everything else can go. So this notion of the colony human, the way you approach that is through something that I've been calling the holonic consciousness, the consciousness that transcends my consciousness. Now, in breaker terms, consciousness is an accident of mentality, of thinking. And since only human beings can think, only human beings have consciousness. And that's a very liberal point of view, because even up to 150, 200 years ago, Black people weren't seen as being human or conscious. And so we didn't have a methodology. We weren't considered as humans, which is always makes me thoughtful. Something came up a couple of weeks ago. You know how there are these, I look at Facebook, but I look at Facebook with a timer. I set a timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not more than that. And I just do a quick check as to what are people talking about here. And people were at one point talking about Woolworths and the Woolworths lunch counter, and how great the food was, and how when you walk through Woolworths, you could smell the food, you know. And they were giving their like their favorite food was the roast turkey, or their favorite food was the macaroni and cheese, etc. And I wrote in and said, I just want you to remember that I wasn't allowed to eat at the Woolworths lunch counter, and we could smell the food. When you walk through, it's like, yeah, it smells pretty good, but when you eat, you're going to go home and eat, because you're not allowed to eat there. You're not good enough to eat there. And so the challenge that we've got is, how do we act not as, well, the red ants have to go over there, and the black ants have to go over there, and the white ants have to go over there. Are there any white ants? Have to go that way. And start looking at, how do we act as a colony that protects its members. But ants also protect other beings. Ants, farm aphids and other things, other beings cooperate with the ants. I mean, they grow their own food underground, they eat fungus, etc. Okay, so let me go to talk about thing diet. So let me talk about the four possible types of colony humans. Number one, okay, and by the way, see, this is called this. I think this is called writing backwards. Okay, because all of this is in this book, although I didn't even realize it was in the book until I went looking for it. So I talk about four different kinds of colonies in Chronicles of the Upheavals and its sequel, Chronicles of the Awakening. Number one is something that gets called in the book old style humans. And I think that I better find another name for them, because I'm not sure people are going to want to be called old style, you know. I guess maybe we could call them fossil humans. Is that any better? Hey, these are the people who would act like modern day humans. They would act from individualized consciousness, something that I call in the books solons. A holon is someone who acts from the whole. A solon is someone who acts as an individual. Their decision-making process is based on me as an individual, based on money and power. Their primary allegiance is to themselves or to an idea. I think we talked about latent powers already, and they would have no acknowledgement of latent powers. Everything about old style humans is unsustainable. They would be sustained by these other colony humans because there's some reason they should be around. And we can talk about that. I encourage people to not think about the replacement of old style humans with the more holistic colony human as an improvement. We need all of them for some reason. Second group, and again, I need some better names here. It's what I'm calling the awakened humans, that they/we would start using collective consciousness to enhance individual behaviors and abilities. So, for example, in the Chronicles of the Upheavals, the people who are living in the awakening villages or the awakening centers would be an example of awakening or awakened humans. That they would be using the latent powers as ways to enhance their activities for the good of the whole. Now, I'll give you an example of this. And again, I didn't think about all this until I was washing dishes one night. On the island of Bali, and for those of you who have been to Bali, you know Bali is a very, very special place. It's hard to actually even talk about how special it is. But the way that their political structure is based on something called the Panchayat. And the Panchayat is a group of local people. I should say a group of all of the local people make decisions about the core elements of their lives. You don't have politics like those people over there. Everybody is involved with politics. And I mean, from the point of view of the most basic decisions that can be made about your life, that's made in the panchayat. For example, when do you get water and how much water do you get? There's no, on the island of Bali, there's no more basic decision than that, because how much water you get and when you get it determines whether or not you get to plant any rice, how much rice you get to plant, when you harvest it. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. And so the panchayat meets, but the meeting is like this party. They're just, I mean, there's like dancing, singing, shadow puppets for the kids, lots and lots of food. I've been to a panchayat, didn't understand a single word was going on, but the decision as to who gets water and when they get the water gets made at this party. It actually means like political parties at a whole different level. If you have a political party, you should have a political party. So our they make the decisions by accessing the holonic consciousness. They make the decision by everybody contributing to the holonic consciousness, not from the point of view of what's good for me as an individual, but what's going to be best for all of us. And those decisions get made instantly, like really, really quickly. This is not making decisions by consensus in this country, which is about, for me, the same as having your teeth extracted without the Novocaine. I mean, I cringe when people say, "Oh, we're going to make this decision by consensus." To make a decision by consensus, the holonic mind has to be present, or you got to be ready for unending talking. Okay, so the third aspect of the colony human is what in the book gets called unity. And unity is the form of consciousness where the individual is demoted in favor of the hive, or the favor of the unified personality. Unitive consciousness means that there's a loss of individuation. You stop thinking like an individual. And for those who have read those 3 or 4 chapters in Chronicles of the Upheavals, and another 3 or 4 chapters in Chronicles of the Awakening, I don't think anybody wants unity. But that's not the question. If there's enough people that want to create what I'm calling a hyper colony, okay, where individuation doesn't exist anymore, they'll do it because the holonic consciousness will support that, and we'll have to deal with the results of that. And then in Chronicles of the Awakening, I introduce what may not actually be a colony, but I talk about the hemi-humans, humans that are part human and then part something else, where their consciousness bleeds over into other species. For example, the example in the book is um, um, a being who is part human and part cetacean, part whale or dolphin, okay, where they are able to communicate with whales and dolphins the way that they communicate, which is not, humans try to teach the whales and dolphins how to speak English, which is a step down in consciousness. Whales and dolphins can't get that stupid, okay, so so these folks could talk to the whales and dolphins at their level. You can judge the consciousness. Okay, so human beings give each other consciousness tests, intelligence tests, because we can identify our own intelligence. We can also judge the intelligence of beings who are lower on the scale of intelligence than human beings, like cats, dogs, rats, etc. But you can't judge the intelligence of a being that's above you on that scale. But since we don't acknowledge anything that's above us, that's the arrogance part of us, we can't see how intelligent whales, dolphins, and I actually put I'm putting corvids in that list of other beings, crows, magpies, and other birds, colony birds, octopuses, not octopi, and probably elephants also. These are beings that are communicating way past our pay grade. If there are space aliens that are coming to Earth, those are the folks they're dealing with, not us. We don't even act like one species, let alone act intelligent enough for a space alien to pay any attention to us. I'm suggesting that we do that. I'm suggesting that, yes, at some point in time, we should become that intelligent. Okay, so that is, I think that, I shouldn't say I think that, I am advocating that colony humans is the way that we get ourselves to the next level of our development as human beings, that we become one human species, that we stop destroying the earth, we stop destroying each other, and we start acting like we have a role to play here on the planet. Okay, questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, criticisms, no criticism, but all the other, say some good stuff about all that. I'm looking for hands, I'm looking for digital hands, I'm looking for Marion's hand, she's waving it around, and then Angela, I see your hand also, and Robin. Okay, in that order, Marion, Angela, and Robin.
This is all super fascinating. Thank you. Maybe you said this and I missed it. I'm so curious, was there a catalyst or a shift of what created the shift between individual to colony paradigm in the ants?
Way too long ago. We don't see that. We don't know what that shift was.
Okay. So it was gradual, super gradual.
They could not, well, it could have been one day they woke up and said, hey, we keep doing the same thing over and over again. Perhaps we ought to just cooperate with each other. What a concept, maybe they were having an equivalent of ant wars going on, and they were like, we're not making progress here. I've been doing a lot of talking about the birth process, about how did the caterpillar butterfly being develop into the very specialized being that they have become. Okay. It's amazing. How did we develop our birth process? When you get into it, it's really amazing. So we're going, I think we're about to do this again. And I think that that everything that we're seeing right now that human beings are going through is part of our birth process. And what we're birthing is the colony human at one of these levels.
I concur, Doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. So I'll send you my bill. I'll send you some drugs. Okay. Stop playing, Cherie. Angela. Can't hear you.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting concepts, colony. From what I'm just where my mind goes with all this is there's a spiritual aspect that is not religious. It is more basic than religion, right? Any means, and is sometimes just maybe religion has made some people choose not to go down a spiritual path at all. But I feel like spirituality is so basic to all beings, just like emotions and our mental and our physical health are. And I think the more we connect spiritually in small groups, in these, be it colony or however it develops, I think it's what you're saying about the colonies is going to raise everybody's collective consciousness, and turn into a global dream. I mean, not even a dream. The dream is going to become reality. So, but I do truly believe that it starts with each individual choosing to accept their own spirituality and then reaching out into small groups, small or, type, just one-on-one for a while or two on however. But the spiritual side of it is, those ants would not have done what they done without knowing a much bigger picture than we as humans will ever figure out as we are now. So go ahead.
Number one, yes, thank you. Number two, beings other than human may guide the way because they're not hung up on what the possibilities are and aren't. I want to share one thing really quickly with you. I'm stepping on my own tongue here, but let's see if I can do this quickly. This is an experiment that was done. Whoops, am I in the right one? You're seeing the peak experiment on your screen right now? Yes, looks like peach, but it's not. Okay, so this is an experiment using a randomizer, a red balloon, and some baby chicks. Okay, so a randomizer is something that just generates a random signal. This randomizer is on a little cart. There's two of them, and the randomizer number 1 chooses a random direction out of 360 degrees. So just kind of go that way or go that way. And the second one determines how far it travels, like 2 inches, 2 feet, 3 feet. It does that. So, as you know, baby chicks will orient toward, will bond with the first thing they see moving when they're born. So when these chicks were born, the experimenters waved the red balloon in front of them. And so the chicks thought red balloon was mama. And so that's a chick, that's a red balloon. Doesn't look anything like each other, but that's all I know is I see this thing moving around. So they put the red balloon on the randomizer and they let the balloon move wherever it felt like moving, and all the little chicks would cluster around the red balloon as it's moving around the room. And they formed a pattern. This is the pattern that the balloon and the chicks formed. Can you see my cursor? Yes, nod your heads, okay. It starts right here and goes that way, that way, that way, that way. It's a completely chaotic pattern. And the chicks are moving around this room in the same way. At this point in time, the chicks are in here, the red balloon is in here, the cage is empty. The second part of the experiment was they took all the baby chicks and they put the baby chicks in a cage. This is a glass wall so the chicks can see the balloon. And theoretically, the balloon can see the chicks. And they put the balloon on the randomizer in the center of the room again. And then they let the balloon run around and they got the second pattern. That's the second pattern. From the time that, so all the chicks are over here. From the time it started, it just went over to the cage and bumped up against this glass trying to get to the chicks. Now, this means that red balloons are a lot smarter than you give them credit for. Or it means something else is going on. And I am very, very interested in that something else. This is what we would call a random pattern. There's nothing random about this pattern. The balloon's trying to get to the chicks, or the chicks are calling their mother. It doesn't even matter that the mother is not an organic object, okay? This is the energy. This is the process that's going to solve all of our problems. And believe me, nobody's studying this stuff. I've been trying to get the Institute of Noetic Sciences to look at things like this for the longest time. And they want to focus on individual consciousness, not on the consciousness of the group. I should say, and to his credit, Rupert Sheldrake is somebody who does an awful lot of thinking about these kinds of situations. Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry, Robin. I jumped right into your spot there. So yeah.
Just a quick question. When you describe the awakened human, how does that compare to what you describe as a mender?
That's where I would put the majority of the menders. That's where the menders would be hanging out. And let me say one more thing about Angela. I think that there are some numbers that we need to be looking at. I think that 2 or 3 people is too small a number to awaken the holonic consciousness. And probably 200 or 300 is too big to awaken that. 20, 30, 50, I don't know. We're all guessing right now, okay? And we need to guess differently. Yeah, and this just could be preference on my part, but I'm thinking that the menders are the people who will be comfortable using the latent power processes, are comfortable looking at that pattern I just showed you and saying, yep, something's going on there, but will not necessarily go as far as unity. Nobody's ready for unity. And for those of you who either haven't read Chronicles of the Upheaval to its end, I suggest you do that. That's where unity shows up, is at the end. And if you have, you may want to refresh yourself in this last three or four chapters. As much as the conscious, as the human beings who we would call awakened consciousness or type 2 consciousness, who are comfortable using the latent powers, none of them were comfortable with unity. They wouldn't even go in the same room with unity. And how are we going to handle that? I think unity handles it really well. Yes, we can crush you, and we're not going to. Other questions or comments or thoughts here? Samantha.
Yeah, I love all the comments that have been made, including your presentation, Sharif. Really inspiring. And the last couple comments that have been made, it's interesting, the holonic consciousness, that is something that already exists. So it's something that isn't necessarily seeking to be created, it's just seeking to be tapped into, attuned to. And so that, in a way, is almost what was represented in that graphic, was that balloon machine was attuning to the energy of the collective consciousness that the birds were expressing. And so that it already exists. It's just a matter of those deep identity, the list of deep identities you talked about earlier. They're so important because that's the pathway to attune, is really diving into those identities within self and really seeing how they show up in your life and looking at them in a sort of non-judgmentally way to release those identities. Releasing that kind of clutter helps us open up to the attunement of what already exists. And so it will just organically be an outflow.
Yes. And I'm sorting through now, looking at my time and at how much story I can get into here. Let's stick with chicks. Okay. So Arthur Kessler did an experiment years ago, again with a randomizer. And that is, this randomizer just spewed out a string of numbers, 10,000 numbers. And then he'd go through and analyze which ones were even and which ones were odd. We know by the rules of the coin flipping my brain is not, there's a technical.
Probability theory.
Say again.
Probability theory.
According to probability theory, if you flip a coin or generate a number, it's at a 50-50 chance of being even or odd. He generates 10,000 numbers, 5,000 are even, 5,000 are odd. It could be 4,992 are even and 5,007 are odd, but it's within the standard deviation. He then hooked the randomizer to a heat lamp and runs it through 10,000 numbers. If the number is even, the light comes on. If the number is odd, the light goes off. Run it through 10,000 numbers. The light is on half the time. The light is off half the time. He then takes a tray of baby chickens and puts it in front of the heat lamp and runs the randomizer through 10,000 numbers, and the heat lamp stays on. And when you go down through the list, you can see that the randomizer is just generating a string of even numbers. You take the chicks away and run it through another 10,000 numbers, it goes right back to 50-50, which means that these chickens are way smarter than you give them credit for, because they can do something that you can't. You can't just sit there and say, oh, I want a string of even numbers now. It doesn't work that way. So Kessler said, I don't know what's doing this. I don't know whether it's the chickens wanting to stay warm that are affecting this random number generator, or am I doing this and I want the little cute chickens to stay warm and I'm making the random number generator spew out even numbers. So he creates a double blind. He has two trays of eggs. One tray of fertile eggs that are about to hatch, and another tray of hard-boiled eggs, which are very difficult to hatch. I haven't tried that, but yeah, anything's possible. And he has someone who's not him put the eggs in front of the heat lamp. So he runs the heat lamp with nothing in front of it. It's 50-50. Runs the tray, the heat lamp with hard-boiled eggs in front of it. It's 50-50. Runs the heat lamp with fertile eggs in it, and the light stays on, which means that fertile eggs are smarter than you are. And Greg.
I just want to say something about your use of the word smart. I think it's human hubris to think that intelligence has anything to do with this. The fact is, the nature of the universe is a living being with desires, I think is a better way to put it. And because of our arrogance, we think that we're smarter than ants that just happen to form colonies and be the most successful species in history. We think we're smarter than whatever caused the mitochondrion to enter the cell and become its energy source in return for the safety and benefit. You know, I believe it's just the nature of the universe that we need to understand and exploit. And so I just wanted to get it away from the word smart.
Yes, and I use that on purpose. There's one more story. Can we hang in there about 2 minutes after the hour? Because I'd like to get this out there because it has to do with not seeing what's directly in front of us and actually having to discredit and disrespect what's actually right in front of us. I'm going to give you the abbreviated version of this. You can look this up on your own. Let's see if I can do this real quick. It has to do with disrespecting keeper consciousness. And it has to do with a video called The Horse Boy. And if you've got a video sharing service, you should be able to get The Horse Boy. Everybody should be a member of Canopy since it's free. And it's associated with your public library. And I'm sure you can get the video through that. Okay. I'm giving you the really abbreviated version here. I encourage you to look at the entire video. It's about 90 minutes long. These people had a child, and the child was profoundly autistic. And for those of you who know about autism, it runs a range, and this child was not functioning in society. 8 years old, could not use the bathroom. He was crapping his pants every day, and would go into rages every day. They're at their wits' end, and they also have money, so they decide that the only thing that the kid would respond to is horses. When the kid was around horses, he would calm down. He would actually look at the horses, etc. They got the idea they were going to go to Mongolia and find a shaman who would do something with the kid. I'm condensing weeks and weeks of journeying around to find the shaman. Everybody said the reindeer people can cure your son, but where are the reindeer people? They're traveling all over Mongolia looking for the reindeer people. The entire time they're in this van, and the kid is crapping his pants and is doing a rage in the van. No water sources. I mean, this is pretty dire. Find the reindeer people. The shaman, through his emissary, shaman will not see them unless he's in his element. Think about this in two worlds. Shaman's in one world and they're in another. So the emissary goes out and says to the family, yeah, of course, the shaman can heal your kid, but we have to find out whether we've got permission to do so. So come back tomorrow. So come back tomorrow, and the emissary then says, yes, he can cure your child. Bring the child to the tent tonight. Bring the kid to the tent tonight. And the shamans do what the shamans do. He's rattling bones, he's burning stuff, etc. And again, I talk like this, but I'm not disparaging what the shaman is doing. The shaman is in a world that we don't inhabit, and he's using his medicine to heal this kid. So he does all that. Next morning, the emissary comes out and says, your son's healed. You're not going to see it all happening right away, but there's two things that you'll notice right away. Number one, your son won't do rages anymore. Number two, your son won't crap his pants anymore. And they said, well, yeah, thank you. And they drive away. And that afternoon, by a river, the son, for the first time in his 8-year-old life, pulls his pants down and takes a crap. And the parents are freaked out. Then they're like, get the cameras, this is amazing. And the kid, it looks like he's just waking up. Like he's looking around like, look at all this stuff. Where did it all come from? For the first time in his life, he actually interacts with another child. by a week or two, he's slow. He's like responding slowly, but he is responding, you know. So the person who is shooting all this video asked the parents what produced this change. And the parents said, both the husband and the wife said, we don't know. And one of them says, oh, we're just outside in this beautiful surroundings with, you know, nature and grass and trees. And the other one says, oh, we're just spending so much time together as a family. We thought that just kind of brought out the best in our child. They, even as the beneficiaries of the holonic consciousness, as the beneficiaries of the keeper culture, as they were getting the benefit, they had to disrespect the culture. Because the only way they could respect the culture is to say, that guy in that tent knows way more than we do. Knows way more than we do. And breakers can't do that. When they go down into the Amazon basin and they ask the shaman down there, which of these drugs will cure this kind of cancer? And he says, oh yeah, that one over there will do that. Combine it with this one over here though. They take those back to New York, put them through gene sequencers, take out the active ingredients, mix it together and call it Zyba something, and make $1 billion on it and not give a penny back to the guy who gave it to them. And that's something that people who are connected to the holonic consciousness do. They give it away. They give it away. And then somebody finally takes it and says, okay, yeah, that's mine. That's mine now. So our challenge is being, let's call this conscious keepers. Let's call this, we're giving this to you for free, but if you make any money on it, we want half of it. If you give it away for free to other people, that's great. But if you make a penny on it, we want half a penny. You want to make $1 billion, we want $500 million. You know, that somebody has to stop the breaker expansion. And that's our job. Okay, folks, I would ask for any other questions or thoughts, but you probably have them and we're way over time. So blessings to all of us. I hope you see, I mean, I think we're halfway through. There's an awful lot more to do here. And we have a task to do. The task is to start the first processes, to start the first consciousness processes where we together say, we are now going to tap into the holonic consciousness and then follow where it's leading. I've got more about all this stuff in next month. I'm going to give you a book list. I'm going to write that down. And you know, we're putting, of course, you know, at the top of the list is creating a world that works for all. And right below that for our group is going to be Chronicles of the Upheavals. If you've read that already, read it again. You get more out of it the second and third readings. And especially focusing on some of the chapters where the holonic consciousness is being talked about. Remember in the first, I guess it's, the chapter is called The Dream, where Man Uncle goes to whoever his supervising monk is, and says, I've been having this dream, and the monk says, oh yeah, we know you've been having the dream. It's the same dream all of the novices are having, and we're gonna, it's about your parents, and we're gonna fix that for you. And he's like, how are you gonna fix my dream? It's like, well, once you recognize the holonic consciousness, doing something like that is easy. Okay, so I'll also give you a reading list of some of Rupert Sheldrake's work and other stuff like that. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you for participating here. And if you turn on your microphones, we can all say goodbye to each other.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Good.
everybody.
Yep. Talk to you at another point in time. Yeah. Bye.
Hi.
Bye.
See you.